Hello Runeterrans, and hopefully welcome back. Today, Riot spoiled us. Wait, I made that joke yesterday, right? Well, they did it again. I know it's spoiler season, and yesterday I made a joke about them spoiling us because we got 2 champions back to back, but for the first time in revealed season history, we've gotten 3 champions in as many days. Today, we were given Veigar along with a number of cards that support Veigar as an archetype. So we're going to dive right in. We're going to talk about them all. And then I want to talk about ways that you can maybe use Veigar, because while he has a support package, I think he's going to be a bit more difficult than some of the other ones we've seen as far as finding a deck or a home for a Veigar specific build. So without further ado, Veigar is a 4-cost 1/4 Yordle from Shadow Isles and Bandle City. But Veigar says, when I'm summoned, create a darkness in hand if you don't have one. On round start, grant your darkness everywhere 1 extra damage. Now, it's not on this graphic. For whatever reason, when Riot made their reveal graphics, they decided to put darkness on the last graphic that they shared. And so it's all the way on screen 3. I'm just going to tell you up front, darkness at its base is a 3-cost slow spell that deals 2 damage to an enemy. So when you create your first one, it's a 3-cost slow spell that deals 2 damage to an enemy. And every time Veigar increases its damage, it goes bigger and bigger and bigger. So Veigar here levels up when you've dealt 12 or more damage with darkness, specifically that spell, and then we get a leveled up Veigar. So he gets the standard +1/+1, remains a 4-cost unit, so becomes a 4-cost 2/5, but his text changes as you would imagine. When I'm summoned and round start, create a darkness in hand if you don't have one. Round start, grant your darkness everywhere 1 extra damage. So we are still scaling, but now we're getting them every round, where we just get 1 when we play Veigar, which is a pretty big deal, and I'll talk about why after we've talked about more of the cards. But we also get this line of text, and this is beautiful. Your darkness can target anything. So we go from only being able to target enemies to anything, and yes, that does include the enemy nexus now. And that is, I think, the big payoff. You're going to be playing Veigar in hopes to crank up your darkness and then just smash the enemy nexus. And because, again, you're creating one every round, you can do this over and over and over if you can keep your Veigar alive. So love the theme here, because as you know, in League of Legends, Veigar, he scales his ability power. He's like the spellcaster version of Nasus. The longer the game goes, the harder he hits until he just starts one-shotting things, and that's what we're trying to do here in Legends of Runeterra. Now, obviously, when you're looking at this, you might be saying to yourself, hey, this sounds pretty hard to pull off. It starts at 2 damage. We have to keep Veigar alive. We have to deal 12 or more damage with darkness, and you are not wrong on a lot of those accounts, right? I'm just going to tell you up front, it's going to be a bit difficult, I think, to level him up, but I think that's by design, because once you level him up, he is a finisher. He's just going to start slinging a ton of damage. Like, if you thought atrocity was a way to close out games, wait until you're getting like 7 and 8 damage darknesses thrown at your nexus every round. So we know he's intended to be hard to level up, and we are going to see some more support cards. But to close out talking about Veigar specifically, we have Event Horizon, which is his champion spell. Now, this one here is going to be showing as dual region. We do need to let you know up front that when we go to the next graphic, it's going to also be shown there as the regular version, and that version is just Bandle City. So Event Horizon is a 5-cost fast spell, and it says stun an enemy, then stun all enemies with 2 or less power. Now, we've seen similar effects to this in the past, and traditionally they're okay. I think where this one potentially shines is that it is a fast speed spell, whereas similar effects in the other sets have always been slow. So if you're talking about like Roar, for example, that's the big hindrance there, whereas this, you can do this defensively and buy yourself some time, which is going to be pretty important. That being said, I don't know if this is going to find much of a home outside of just being his champion spell, unless we see other reasons to stun things. I don't think you're going to be running a Yasuo Bandle City stun deck, for example. So you're really reaching, I think, outside of this being his champion spell, if you're trying to find a home for this competitively anyway. But that's Veigar and his champion spell. So we're going to move on to the next graphic, because we have to talk about the support cards before we can talk about the entire package and how I envision Veigar manifesting itself as a deck. So we're going to move on here to the next screen. And as I said before, Event Horizon is here. It's just Bandle City. Everything else about it is the same, but we need to talk about Dark Bulb Acolyte. This is a 2-cost 2/2, does have the Yordle tag. It is only in Bandle City, and I think that's important. It has Augment, which I think is actually kind of neat, and it also says when I'm summoned, create a darkness in hand if you don't have one. So before we even move on and talk about the other darkness cards, right, the other Veigar package pieces, I want to highlight a couple of things that I think are both neat and concerning here. First, you're going to notice that all the rest of the kind of Veigar support pieces are actually in Bandle City. Yes, he's Shadow Isles and Bandle City, but you're playing Veigar in a Bandle City and then another region deck. If you are trying to level up Veigar specifically, you're playing him there. Where you might play Veigar outside of that would be, again, in like a tree win condition deck where you just care about him being Shadow Isles as a region, and you might see him as a one of in those lists. But if you are going into a Veigar deck and not a tree deck, you're playing Bandle City as one of your core regions. So you need to recognize that. Now, you also kind of chuckle at the augment here because this is neat. The Acolyte does get bigger, or at least more, you know, powerful on the attack side of things, right? It's going to become a 3/2 when you play the darkness that it creates. And if you keep playing darkness and you keep playing these created cards, you're going to get more value out of that. And that will come into play in a little bit when I talk about how I envision Veigar going. But you also have to understand that this is only creating another darkness and it's not increasing the damage. And if you want to start working on Veigar leveling up, that means you're going to have to be playing these darkness cards over and over again. You're going to need to get that value running, which means you have to commit to not just playing the units and the other pieces of the package, but you also have to commit to that mana investment for the darkness. Now I'm going to throw the previous screen up real quick because I want to remind you that Veigar's level up condition does not require him to see you deal the damage with darkness. So where you might have Acolyte on round 2 into a darkness from the Acolyte on round 3 into a Veigar on round 4, you're not losing any of your value there, other than that it's just a small darkness. It's just a 2 damage darkness, but you're still advancing your Veigar game plan, and I think that's really important. Now, when we talk about the Veigar game plan, we have to again address that we have to play the spell. I said before, we need to make sure that we're creating them and then playing them, and part of that means designating the mana to actually play the spell. So that's where Stilted Robemaker comes into play. This is a 4-cost 3/4, has the Yordle tag, is only in Bandle City, and it says when I'm summoned, reduce the cost of your darkness everywhere by 1. So this is kind of nice because you are giving yourself that permanent cost reduction. It's not just while it's on the field. That would make this card infinitely worse, but even still, I gotta be honest, I don't know if this is going to be worth it in a dedicated Veigar deck because it is a 3/4 for 4 with no keywords, no other benefits. Yes, it is making your darkness cheaper, but if you're playing a slower kind of control-y deck anyway, you're probably accounting for having to play those spells. I don't know. I can definitely see where this would fit in. Cost reduction is a very powerful effect in Legends of Runeterra. I have a feeling this is not going to be any different. And yet I can also see the argument for just not even including it because it is a 4-cost 3/4 and you're not getting a ton of benefit from it because you're going to play this and then you might play, you know, 3 or 4 more darkness throughout the cost of a game. So you're really only getting that cost reduction 3 or 4 more times, and that's assuming everything goes well. And I don't know. And you're probably playing multiples of this in your deck as well. And so if you get your hands where you don't have any ways to create your darkness and you've got 3 robe makers, it's going to feel really bad. So I can see the argument both ways. I think it's going to take some testing, but you at least have this as an option, and I like that that is the case. However, where Robe Maker is not necessarily impressive, I think Twisted Catalyzer is an auto include in your Veigar lists. Twisted Catalyzer is a 2-cost 3/2, has the Yordle tag, is only in Bandle City, but it says on strike, you grant your darkness everywhere 1 extra damage. I know you can't see it because my head is covering it, but this is huge. This is another way where you get to increase the damage that your darkness is doing, and you really need this outside of Veigar because Veigar only does it on round start, and so you have to play Veigar Then you have to protect Veigar, and he's already kind of small. He's also coming down on round 4 in all likelihood at the earliest, and so you don't want to wait that long to get your damage up and running. And now, again, I really like that this is strike so that you can maybe get some value blocks in. If your opponent is swinging with a 1-1, you can block, get 1 damage increase, and then turn around and attack, or just block a second time, get that second damage increase. You obviously, again, benefit from strike effects, so this is not necessarily a deck where I envision you playing a lot of Demacia with Veigar. And again, I'm going to talk about that at the end when we've seen all of the cards, but let's be honest, you're running Twisted Catalyzer if you are playing Veigar. There's just no way around it. You need that damage increase outside of Veigar. It's huge. Now we're going to move on to the final graphic, which finally shows darkness. So again, as I said before, you can see it as a 3-cost slow spell, deals 2 to an enemy. That's the base, but we do also get to finally see some other cards as well. But these are not, in my opinion, necessarily Veigar cards. You get them with the Veigar reveal, and I think in part it's because specifically like Tenor of Terror, for example, you're getting another dual region card that is Shadow Isles and Bandle City, and so you throw them in with Veigar, and they got that feel with the art. But I don't think you're running these in a Veigar deck, which is interesting. These are not necessarily Veigar support cards. But let's not harp on that too much. Let's just talk about them, and then we'll wrap everything up. We're going to start with Wizened Wizard. This one's the closest to maybe being a Veigar card. This is a 3-cost 3/2 Yordle. It's in Bandle City only, and it says on round start, refill 1 spell mana. This is just kind of inherently a pretty neat effect because it's kind of like mana ramp that's not true mana ramp. You do have to pay 3 mana for a 3/2 with no immediate board impact, and so traditionally stuff like that has not seen great amounts of play. You're risking this dying to a Mystic Shot. It doesn't necessarily block very well. You also want to leave this on the back line, so I don't know if this is going to end up making the cut, but you can see where it potentially ties in with like a Veigar theme or just any sort of spell theme. This is also the kind of Bandle City card that you might consider in like prank decks, just because that 1 spell mana means you're always going to have mana up for those pesky little pranks. So you like the flexibility, but I'm not necessarily excited about a 3-cost 3/2, no keywords, no immediate return on investment. I know, crazy, right? Next up, we've got Mini Morph. This is a 6-cost burst spell in Bandle City, and it says transform an enemy into a 3/3 mini T and silence it. And you can see mini T over there is adorable, and you can hear the screams of players already regarding this card. You know that people are going to hate it. You're going to hear a lot of complaints, and I'm going to explain why. Again, I don't necessarily know that this is too strong, not strong enough. I don't know if it'll see competitive play. I just know that you will hear complaints because, one, this says an enemy, so this hits champions. You can have your Precious Lee Sin, for example, turned into a 3/3 that's been silenced permanently, and you can have that happen at burst speed. Now they have to pay 6 for it, and you still get the body, obviously, but you lose a precious piece. And so you know players will hate it because of that. The number one thing that upsets card game players more than anything is when you feel like you don't get the opportunity to do the thing you wanted your deck to do. That's ultimately what it comes down to. When you sit down to play a card game, you build a deck and you have an idea in mind and you have ways you want to express yourself as a player. And then when your opponent just says, no, you don't get to do those things, it feels bad. Now, you're always dealing with removal and there are things that you can plan for, but anytime you have that level of disruption, so again, whether it's nab was people potentially taking your key pieces, and so you had a lot of complaints, or whether it's discard or just general disruption via prank, you're going to have complaints, and we've already seen that. And here you're going to have people who say, hey, you know, I spent all this time playing Legends of Runeterra to build decks around my favorite champion, and now whenever I play my favorite champion, it becomes a mini T. Well, you're going to have people complain about that, so you know it's coming. I'm just doing this to warn you. In terms of balance, I'm on the fence. Yes, it feels strong right out of the gate. It is a burst speed answer, and it's cheaper than Vengeance, but it's not also true removal because you're leaving them with a 3/3, but I don't think that matters for the decks that want to play this. And so, yeah, it looks really strong right now, and it looks like it could be a real decent value generator. But really, I just wanted to talk about it to tell you, you're going to hear complaints about this if you haven't already. What you're not going to hear complaints about, though, is Tenor of Terror, or at least I don't think so. You actually could hear complaints about this because this is, I think, a really strong card. It's just really weird they debuted this with Veigar because this is a very aggressive card, and I think you play this in Shadow Isles aggro decks. Tenor of Terror is a 4-cost 2/3 Yordle, but it is in Bandle City and Shadow Isles. It has the impact keyword, but it says when I'm summoned, if you've created a card, which you know is pretty easy to do if you're in Bandle City, or if you've killed a unit with a spell this game, which you know is very easy to do with Shadow Isles, summon a Base of Burden. And Base of Burden is a 3/2 with impact. And so you have to understand, one, this doesn't care how you killed the unit with a spell. So even something like Glimpse is a way that you can activate this trigger, and you're playing Glimpse in your Shadow Isles aggro decks. And so you could very easily spend 4 mana to give yourself a 2/3 and a 3/2. So that's a 5/5's worth of stats across 2 bodies for 4 mana. And you get impact on both of them, which means you also get 2 triggers of impact if they're both blocked. So you're in Shadow Isles, you want to go wide anyway, and you like the extra bodies, and you can trigger this very easily, and you also get some direct damage via impact potentially. You love everything about this. So I think this card is good. I think it will find a home somewhere. You will see it in an aggressive list. I just thought it was funny that they debuted it with Veigar, because I don't think you play this in a Veigar deck. But that's actually it for the reveals, because Base of Burden is a token card only created by Tenor of Terror, and we see Darkness down there, which we've already heard about. So now we get to talk about how I imagine Veigar being built as a deck, and highlighting why I think it will go in these potential directions. But first, before we dive right in, I actually want to go to the previous screen, because you really, I think, have to focus on Twisted Catalyzer more than anything, because you're using this to speed up your Veigar game plan if Veigar is your true win con more than anything else. You have to take advantage of Twisted Catalyzer, and so you need ways to have more Twisted Catalyzers. And so I think you need to consider one possibility for your deck is Bandle City paired with Piltover and Zaun. You get all of the Piltover and Zaun control tools added to your arsenal. You get to run Mystic Shot, maybe you even run Get Excited or something else. But you also get access to Iterative Improvement. And Iterative Improvement is nice because you can play more catalyzers, and not only do you get more strikes that way, but you get bigger catalyzers as well when you do that. And so you might get that extra strike out of it so that you continue to increase the damage of your Darkness. You also get access to good card draw that's in Piltover and Zaun, so that you find your Veigar, which is also very important. And you also have access to more created cards, whether that is through improvement or through things like Ballistic Bot and so forth. And that means you get the small benefit of Acolyte actually triggering its augment as well. This is obviously not necessarily a huge deal, but you do get the benefit. So I wanted to highlight that's a really cool synergy there. But really, you need to play, I think, these additional core support pieces often, because you can't just rely on Veigar. If you're stuck relying on drawing your champion and you have to let it sit around on the board for multiple rounds, well, anybody who's played Lee Sin knows that you can do all of the setup ahead of time and you still never find Lee Sin. You're not going to have a good time there. So you need a way to speed up your game plan when you are not finding your champion, so that you get immediate value when you play it. And then you also need ways to find your champion. And so Piltover and Zaun with the card draw, I think, is going to give you some great options. Now, that's not the only way to play Veigar in my mind. I think that the other way you can go is you still play Bandle City, but you also could go with Ionia, because then you get access to Karma. I mean, you get the other control tools, and right now Ionia is kind of busted. I expect there to be some toning down there just in general, but you get Karma. And if you're trying to increase the damage that your Darkness is doing, well, it turns out copying the spell is a great way to do it. And so if you can get it to a 6 damage Darkness by the time you hit round 10 and you've got your Karma, well, a single Darkness levels up your Veigar, and then you get another darkness, and now you're likely dealing 12 damage to the Nexus or more because you're copying it and you get to target the Nexus. So you get that like immediate finisher. So I think that those are going to be the two ways you'll see Veigar get played the most. I'm looking forward to trying out both of them, but it's not just about me. I want to hear from you. How are you going to play Veigar? Is there a deck archetype that you are excited for that I did not mention? Or are you like me and you're just going to jam Karma or like Piltover and Zon? You could also, if you're looking for other champions, for example, pair him with somebody like Victor, because you're going to get the discounts on your created cards, aka Darkness, as far as cost goes, and you're going to get credit towards leveling Victor up every time you play the Darkness. You've got a lot of options, I think, in Piltover and Zon, but again, you've got other options that exist in other places as well. And so I want to know, how are you going to play Veigar? Are you going to play Veigar at all, or do you think that he's a bit too weak? There's not actually a lot of support here for his specific archetype, but as I said at the top of the video, that's by design, because he's going to close out games if you can level him up. But yes, I'm just droning on at this point. I'm really excited, and like I said, I want to hear from you, so let me know in the comments, how are you going to play Veigar? Are you going to play Veigar? Did I leave anything out? That's it for this video. If you made it this far, you listened to my rambling at the end, you are a saint. Thank you, and until next time, may you walk on warm sands.